What if I told you that affairs don't just affect the heart? They actually hijack the brain? That's why so many people say, I knew it was wrong, but I still couldn't stop. Affairs create powerful dopamine loops built on novelty, secrecy, fantasy, and emotional escape. And over time, those patterns begin functioning very similar to addiction. But today, we're going to talk about why that happens, what Scripture says about it, and most importantly, how healing and freedom are actually possible. So stay tuned. Hey, beautiful. Are you done with the pain, devastation, and overwhelm that marital betrayal has thrown at you? And you need a real roadmap to recovery. And you also desire to heal God's way. Well, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Lisa, a betrayal, trauma, and infidelity recovery specialist who went from being crushed and humiliated by my own husband's affair to a global sought-after recovery specialist, helping Christian women and couples just like you heal and recover from the devastation of marital betrayal, all while doing it God's way. Are you ready to dive in? I know I am. So, grab your favorite latte, maybe a glass of wine, snuggle up with your favorite blanket on the couch, and let's focus on you right now. Let's do this, beautiful. Welcome back to the Beauty Beyond Betrayal podcast. Friends, I'm so glad you decided to join me for another episode. And today we're talking about a question so many couples are asking right now. Why do affairs feel so addictive? Why does someone keep going back, even when they know they're risking everything? Why can't they just stop? Why does logic seem to disappear when the affair is happening? And if you're the betrayed spouse listening today, you may have asked yourself, how could they choose this over our marriage? But what most people do not understand is that affairs often function neurologically very similar to addiction. I know, right? People, when they find that out, go, excuse me, what? Yes, it's true. Now, that does not excuse the behavior. Please hear me loud and clear. Sin is still sin. Choices still matter. Accountability is still necessary. But understanding what is happening inside the brain can help couples stop personalizing the behavior and start addressing the real root of the problem. Because affairs are rarely just about sex. Let me say that again. You heard me right. Affairs are rarely just about sex. They are often about escape, the dopamine hit, fantasy, validation, emotional anesthesia, and unresolved wounds. And today we're going to unpack all of it through Scripture and neuroscience. So you know the drill. Grab your spouse and your notebooks and your pen and whatever iced latte or espresso you're drinking right now, because it is hot outside. And the humidity, well, it's kicking into gear. And let's take some time. Let's just take a time out. Maybe you're on the beach somewhere. Maybe you're in the mountains, wherever you are. Let's take a time out. And let's dive into this teaching today, because I really know that it'll give you a little more understanding. Hopefully, it'll lead to some great conversation and some better understanding of each other's worlds, so to speak. So, why do the affairs feel so addictive, right? Well, let's begin with what's happening inside of the brain. When someone enters into an affair relationship, the brain experiences an intense surge of dopamine. And let me say that again, because my dog just went wild with UPS. So, when someone enters into an affair relationship, the brain experiences an intense surge of dopamine. Now, dopamine is the brain's reward chemical, okay? It feels good. It rewards you, so to speak. And it creates anticipation, craving, motivation, and pursuit. And what makes affairs especially dangerous neurologically is this. Affairs combine three extremely powerful dopamine triggers simultaneously. What are they? Well, it's novelty, secrecy, and emotional fantasy. And that combination creates an intense neurological high. And research in neuroscience has shown that novelty activates the reward pathways in the brain at a heightened level. The brain becomes stimulated by what feels new, exciting, or different. Then you add the component of secrecy, the hidden behavior, right? Hidden behavior actually intensifies dopamine production because the brain perceives risk and reward together. Well, and then there comes fantasy bonding. Now, fantasy bonding is when a person emotionally attaches not to reality, now hear me on this, not to reality, but to an idealized emotional experience. You see, the affair becomes less about the actual person and more about what the relationship represents emotionally. What could that be? Well, it could be escape, validation, control, desire. Maybe it's feeling alive again. That's where the brain starts associating the affair with relief from pain, stress, shame, maybe insecurity, boredom, loneliness, or even emotional emptiness. And over time, this creates a reinforcement loop. What happens is the brain learns, when I feel discomfort, this behavior right here, well, it gives me relief. That is how addiction pathways form. Now you know. Not because the affair partner is magical. Now you need to hear this because you as the betrayed, listen, I know you've thought all these things, but you need to hear this loud and clear. Not because the affair person is magical. They're not. Not because the marriage was hopeless, because it never is. And not because your spouse wasn't enough, you weren't enough. None of that is the truth. It's because the brain became conditioned to seek emotional escape through fantasy and dopamine reward cycles. Now that's powerful. It really, really is. But what's more powerful is that Scripture described this pattern long before neuroscience ever did. You see, James 1:14-15 says, "But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death." Now, I want you to notice the progression. Desire, enticement, concealment, sin, destruction. Do you notice it? That is exactly how addictive cycles operate. Sin always promises relief before it delivers devastation. Satan makes it look really good, guys. Really good. Then the devastation occurs. Affairs create the illusion of life while slowly destroying your soul, your mind, and your covenant. And many are trapped in affairs. They are trapped in the affairs, and they're not actually pursuing love. They're pursuing escape. They're medicating pain. They're avoiding deeper issues within themselves. And until those roots are addressed, the cycle usually repeats. That's where we get this old adage of once a cheater, always a cheater, because roots were never addressed. So they stay vulnerable to it over and over again. But for a child of God, it doesn't have to be that way. Now, I want to talk to you quickly about why it becomes so difficult to end the affair, okay? Because I know for my husband, it was hard. It was very difficult for him to end the affair. You know, many truly do say, I wanted to stop, but I just couldn't. I hear that from couples all the time. And neurologically, there's a reason for that. You see, repeated dopamine exposure weakens the brain's executive functioning. That part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for judgment, reasoning, long-term thinking, and impulse control, well, it becomes overridden by the reward system. It's hijacked. It's unplugged from the wall, so to speak. It's offline. This is why people in affairs often act irrationally. You see, they compartmentalize. They minimize. They justify their behavior. And they actually justify behavior they normally would never justify. They become emotionally disconnected from reality because the brain is chasing a chemical reward. This is why withdrawal after ending an affair can feel so intense. Yes, you heard me. There is a withdrawal. There is a detox period, and it is intense. Why is that? Well, the brain suddenly loses the dopamine hits. There's no more validation. The fantasy stimulation is gone, and, well, there's no more emotional escape. So the person experiences cravings, emotional dysregulation, depression, agitation, or obsessive thoughts. And many of you that are the betrayed spouse, you're thinking they're going through that because they were deeply in love. Well, that's not actually true. The affair was not true love. The brain became chemically dependent on the cycle. That's why they are going through a detox, a withdrawal. And all of those things that I said they experience are a part of that. And this is exactly why behavior modification alone is not enough. You cannot heal an affair by simply saying, well, I'll never do that again. If the underlying wounds, the escape patterns, belief systems, the emotional immaturity, and neurological conditioning are not addressed, well, the cycle often returns. That's why inside of Marriage Redesigned, we help couples just like you move beyond surface level recovery. We actually address your nervous system, the root beliefs that you have, the emotional disconnection, the trauma you're experiencing, the attachment wounds, the spiritual brokenness, and the relational rebuilding process. Because true healing is not just stopping the behavior. It's actually about being transformed. It's about becoming a different person, a new person. The old must die and the new must be reborn. If your marriage right now is struggling after betrayal and you're ready for real transformation, what I just talked about, not just temporary behavior change, then I want to invite you to apply for Marriage Redesigned. You can go below in the show notes, click on the Marriage Redesign link, and get a free consult. And we can see if this is a good fit for you. We want to make sure it's a good fit because we take couples who are 100% in. You've got to be 100% in, okay? So let's assess to see where you are. Now, I want to give you your first step to healing from an affair. You need something, and I want to give you something today. So what is that first step? Well, it's called radical honesty. And some of you just cringed because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm scared to do that. Because if they know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, oh my goodness. I get it. But that is your first step toward healing. Radical honesty. Not partial truth, not damage control, not minimizing, and not this drip disclosure stuff, this trickle truth stuff. No, that's traumatizing time and time again. It's like waterboarding. It's torturous. That doesn't heal. It brings more trauma. Healing begins when secrecy ends, because secrecy is what keeps addiction alive. You see, secrecy is in the darkness, and darkness feeds dysfunction, and darkness is the devil's domain, and that's where he'll get you every time. but truth breaks it. Ephesians 5:13 says, "But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light." In other words, we need to bring it into the light of God. The very first step is being radically honest and bringing everything into the light of God. That means ending the affair completely, cutting off all contact, telling the whole truth, stopping the deception, and becoming accountable. You see, without honesty, there can be no true healing. And without safety, well, trust cannot be rebuilt. Now, if you're listening to this today and you're the one who's been unfaithful, I need you to hear me really clearly. Your behavior may have become addictive, but you are not beyond redemption. God can heal what sin has broken, but healing requires surrender, not image management, not performance, and not empty promises, but real transformation. Romans 12:2 says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That is neuroscience and Scripture aligning beautifully together. Healing literally requires rewiring the brain and renewing your mind. And if you're the one who's betrayed listening today, I also want you to hear this. The affair, it was never proof that you were unworthy. It was proof that your spouse was using unhealthy ways to cope with unresolved issues within themselves. Not to excuse the behavior, but to explain it. Their choices are not a measurement of your value, not by any means. So you need to work on your identity just like your spouse does. Now, friends, I want you to know this. Affairs feel addictive because they activate powerful neurological reward systems that are tied to fantasy, novelty, escape, and emotional validation. But what begins as excitement eventually becomes bondage. And the good news is this. What has been wired can be rewired. That means healing is possible. Restoration is possible. Freedom is possible. But it starts with radical honesty, with truth. So, if you are ready to do this thing, if you're ready for a structured, faith-based, neuroscience-informed path toward healing after betrayal, I would love to walk with you inside of Marriage Redesigned. We help couples every day rebuild safety, restore trust, heal trauma, and create a marriage that is healthier than the one that existed before the betrayal. So go below in the show notes, click on Marriage Redesign link, and get your consult today. And I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for subscribing, being a loyal listener, and sharing this out. This is keeping us all across the globe so that other couples just like you can find hope and healing from the devastation of marital betrayal. Until next time, remember, your healing is possible. Hope is very real. And your story is definitely not over. Be blessed. Thanks for stopping by and spending a little time with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's show and you found hope, healing, and encouragement. Please remember to subscribe to my podcast and leave a review. You can even screenshot this episode. You can share it out on Facebook and IG stories. This is how we get the message of hope and healing out to all women and couples who are in need of restoration after betrayal. And if you're ready to move out of that devastation and take the next step in your healing journey, well, make sure to reach out. Schedule your coaching session today. Until next time, love God, live your life passionately, and always choose joy in the midst of any circumstance that you may face. Cheers to you, beautiful.